Kohler has denied allegations that she made classified intelligence public. During his second day of testimony at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry this afternoon, KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi implicated several high-ranking officials. In alleged crime within the criminal justice system. Although she serves on Parliament's Joint Committee for Intelligence, its members are prohibited from disclosing classified information. In June, Kohler issued a DA media statement revealing that the Inspector General of Intelligence had completed a probe into alleged unlawful property acquisitions. Mkhwanazi has argued before the inquiry that by releasing classified details, Kohler had undermined state intelligence.
The proverbial horse has indeed bolted. The Madlanga Commission commenced with its work yesterday. Mr. Machuna was placed on leave of absence, and Acting Minister Kashalia was appointed and has assumed office. We therefore conclude that the matter is not urgent.
Apologies for the incorrect clip, but we will have more details on that story in our upcoming bulletins. In a statement issued this afternoon, Kohler denied the accusations, calling them outrageous, defamatory and entirely baseless. The Commission has wrapped up proceedings for the day and will resume tomorrow. For live updates on the Commission, visit ewn.co.za or watch live proceedings on our YouTube channel. Joburg Water has committed to start building a new water pipeline next Monday to assist the main system supplying Westbury and surrounding areas. The utility, alongside Mayor Dada Morero, addressed frustrated residents who briefly disrupted the engagement in Coronationville this afternoon. The pipe, which will take up to 3 weeks to install, is set to draw water from the Crosby Reservoir, which has a high water pressure. The effort comes as the main water system supplying Westbury, Coronationville and surrounding areas has failed to build up enough supply to fully restore water to the area. Joburg Mayor Dada Morero.
The plan includes to undertake under-pressure drilling and laying an approximately 200 meters of pipeline to connect to these two pipes.
The Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee has taken a cautious approach to rates after making the first pause since the July meeting. The central bank's MPC held the repo rate at 7% in its latest decision announced today. While this in line with market expectations, the split in votes signals a tougher call for the MPC this time around. 4 members voted for a pause, with 2 others voting for another cut. Nukanyam Dambo has more.
Since September last year, the Reserve Bank's benchmark rate has been reduced by 125 basis points, including the cut seen in July. Governor Lesetja Kganyago says the central bank now wants to see how this is affecting the economy, how expectations evolve, and how inflation risks are resolved.
The forecast has raised easing gradually as inflation returns to the bottom end of the 3 to 6% target range. The MPC emphasizes that stabilizing inflation at 3% rather than 4.5% implies a lower, longer-term level for the policy rate.
Kganyago says the global economy remains resilient despite ongoing geopolitical tensions and trade disruptions. But longer-term interest rates have risen in several major economies, reflecting pressures from high and rising debt levels and persistent inflation risks. Nogukanyam Dambo, Eyewitness News.
We move to the courts, where the state in the Lusikisiki mass murder trial in the Eastern Cape has completed leading evidence from over 25 witnesses as the case gets postponed to early next year. For over 2 months now, the 6 men accused of the massacre stood trial in the Mthatha High Court, sitting in Lusikisiki. 18 people were shot and killed execution style in Ngobazana village last year. The group is facing charges including murder, conspiracy to commit murder, as well as firearm and ammunition-related charges. Nhlanhla Mabaso takes a look.
With the high-profile murder trial now being put to a halt for the next 3 months, the state says it remains confident in its case. Over the past 2 months, prosecutors have led evidence from witnesses, including families of the victims, crime scene experts and analysts, as well as a 204 witness, Lwando Abi. Thus far, most testimonies have connected the accused to the massacre, with the firearms used also positively identified. NPA spokesperson Luxolo Tyali says the matter will return to court on the 19th of January 2026.
It is expected to proceed up until the 27th of March.
The proceedings will resume with lawyers for accused 2 to 6 cross-examining the key state witness. Nhlanhla Mabaso, Eyewitness News, Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape.
And more than 100 Mercedes-Benz vehicles are being recalled by the National Consumer Commission due to safety concerns. In a statement released today, the Commission says the company has identified two faulty models, namely the 4EQE295 and 98GLC254. The NCC has highlighted that the steering wheels of the affected vehicles do not meet required specifications. NCC spokesperson Peter Ndaba is urging all affected consumers to contact their nearest Mercedes-Benz dealership.
According to Mercedes-Benz, the bolting of the steering coupling might not actually meet the specifications. And it basically means that the mechanical connection between the steering wheel and the steering rack might loosen over time. And of course, when that happens, it might actually lead to a loss of the vehicle's steerability.
Gold's trading at $3,645.72 an ounce. The rand's at 17.36 to the dollar, at 23.53 to the pound, at 20.44 to the euro. Brent crude oil's at $67.99 a barrel.
In your sport, Sinesipho Dambile runs personal best to qualify for the World Championships 200-meter final. Megazeli Mbogazi and Chandra Campbell to miss the Under-20 FIFA World Cup. And Miguel Cardoso keen to bolster Mamelodi Sundowns' attack after Lucas Ribeiro's exit.
A look at your weather. Clear skies in store for Gauteng tomorrow. Joburg will drop to overnight lows of 8 degrees and peak at highs of 28. Pretoria is at 10 and 29. Vereeniging's at 5, also reaching highs of 29 degrees. The mother city is also set to experience clear skies tomorrow, along with moderate southeasterly winds at a low of 11 and a high of 24 degrees. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour. DA Member of Parliament Diane Kohler has denied allegations that she made classified intelligence public.
EWN, in touch, in tune, and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app. EWN Traffic.
Well, traveling through Alex, heading towards Germiston, we still have bumper traffic on the N3 southbound between Marlborough Drive and Van Buren. Also, driving through the Joburg CBD, traffic is a bit sluggish. M1 south between Killarney Bains and the Crown Interchange. Otherwise, generally, things have settled down pretty nicely in Gauteng. No other accidents have been reported. The one in Kempton Park on the R24 westbound before the R21 has been cleared and traffic should be back to normal shortly. In the mother city, we still have slow-moving traffic. M5 southbound. This is between Pinelands and Rondebosch. Also on Nelson Mandela Boulevard, slow-moving traffic approaching Rondebloem. If you come across any other traffic issues, please WhatsApp us on 072-702-1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
And now, The Money Show with Moteo Paripe
On 702. Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday edition of The Money Show. My name is Moteo Paripe. I don't have much good news to tell today. The interest rates unchanged, our economy still not growing, and the higher interest rates that we need to deal with in this particular economy. Some stories coming out of the beverages sector. Coca-Cola speaking to job cuts. We'll cover all of that on The Money Show. The South African Reserve Bank has cut interest rates by 125 basis points over the past year. Today, that all stops. That all stops today. The governor, Lesetja Kganyago, announcing a 4-2 split between the governors. The interest rates go unchanged at 7%, prime lending rate at 10.5%. What does that mean for you and me as consumers in this particular economy? Dr. Gulam Balim, chief economist at Standard Bank, joins us for that conversation. Reece Dyer, the CEO at Uber Group, they deal, of course, with home loans and bond originations. We'll be talking about the rents and cents of buying a home and how the market looks like with this interest rates going unchanged. A market commentary covered by Rudy van der Merwe, of course, from portfolio manager at Advice Works, who'll look at the Rand's reaction to, firstly, the U.S. Interest rate cut last night and also going into today's decision from the South African Reserve Bank. Later on the show, we have Tech Thursday, looking at the online gambling boom in South Africa. Things are changing with a lot of the casinos now on our mobile phones. A danger if you, of course, lose all your money, but all the gambling companies smiling all the way to the bank, the likes of Sunbet reporting a more than 70% growth in the market. We'll be talking to Spumelele Zondi about that particular conversation. Then later, our small business focus, looking at influencers in the country, those that do advertising online, on our social medias. They've caught the eye of the revenue collector in the country. SARS now looking at the monies that they earn and just how much tax they are paying. Luncedo Mtwentwe, Managing Director, Advantage Advisory, joining us for that conversation a bit later. In our investment school, we talk the Rand Roulette. When is the right time to take your money offshore? We'll be talking to Patrick Matidi from Aluwani Capital Partners and Gary Boyson from Rand Swiss. So do stay tuned here on The Money Show. Let's talk money.
The Money Show
with Moteo Juaripe
on 702. Let's walk the talk.
If you are like me, you would have been crossing your fingers for a rate cut from the South African Reserve Bank. I mean, all indications were that it was possible. There was a bit of room for that to happen. Inflation was at 3.3%. We were looking at a better GDP growth number that came out earlier in the month. And inflation also was quite steady. But the South African Reserve Bank meeting this week and the MPC deciding to leave things unchanged. They've cut those interest rates by 125 basis points over the past year, and they say they want to have time to look at how the market responds to those particular cuts before they do any further shaving of those interest rates. We're joined now by Gulam Balim, the chief economist at Standard Bank, and of course looking at the property market with Reece Dyer, the CEO of Uber Group. Now, let's get to Gulam first. Gulam, looking at the assessments from the MPC, this was a very interesting statement from them, saying they are looking at, a particular time where they'd like to assess how the past cuts have gone and where that leaves them as the MPC. What's your take on this particular decision?
Mateo, hi, and thanks for having me. We did go into this meeting, as did many other analysts, expecting that the Reserve Bank would not trim rates. In other words, they would hold monetary policy steady, and certainly that was the outcome. Of the 6 voting members, 4 voted for steady rates, and 2 were inclined to call for 25 basis points cut. So you're correct in suggesting it was plausible to anticipate some cut. All in, the manner in which the Reserve Bank is approaching monetary policy, where it wants to guide over time inflation expectations towards 3%, did augur for a slightly conservative approach. So hence doing nothing was consistent with a near to medium term ambition to lower inflation expectations, and with it drive inflation within a near to medium term framework towards the 3% ambition.
Then we're also joined by Justine Eastrop, the Provincial Sales Manager for Uber Home Loans. The CEO, unfortunately, not available to join us. But Justine, looking at the housing market, when things are unchanged and interest rates stay higher for longer, what does that mean on your side of things? Are you seeing more customers walk through your doors, or they're holding back to see whether we'll have more cuts?
Good day, Mateo. Thank you for having me. Yes, so we're certainly not seeing any sort of reduction in the property market. We're really actually seeing quite a nice steady uptick in the property market. While interest rates are quite important to the home buyer or the homeowner in South Africa, it certainly hasn't stunted the numbers and what we're seeing from a vulnerable perspective.
When we look at the market and the cutting of those interest rates over the past year, since last year, September, what has the change been for the home loan market? Because a lot of South Africans were looking at interest rates quite high from last year, some even being cautious getting into bond agreements for their homes. Are you expecting that in the next few years, as interest rates are shaved, that will turn around for the market?
Yes, even with the shaving of the interest rates that we've seen, we've certainly seen an improvement in the property market, and sentiment being that the potential home buyer is more comfortable in purchasing the property, and a big sign and signal for us is that first-time home buyer space and whether they are able to afford to get into the market, and we're starting to see that number creep up again. So that's an early detection as to whether the buyers can get into the property market, in particular the first-time home buyers.
Gulam, the SARB saying today that they're looking at a market where NERSA had a correction in terms of those electricity prices. They're expecting them to go up to 8% now. That should drive up inflation just a little bit. That was a bit of a concern for them. But also the US tariffs that have hit South Africa since August. Going forward, we have one more interest rates announcement in November. Do you think that the SARB will change its mind from its position today?
No, I think it'll hold steady. I think a few things that the SARB will take into account. Inflation over the near to medium term is likely to be fairly well behaved. We anticipate inflation of around 3.5% this year, rising to 4% next year, but generally over the 3-year horizon, remaining below 4%. Secondly, the Reserve Bank did raise its growth forecast for 2025 from near 1% to above 1%, to 1.2% specifically. So there's a little bit of optimism in that respect. And thirdly, the economy seems to be doing reasonably well under strained circumstances. In other words, because inflation has been low, real incomes, in other words, incomes after inflation, have been growing around 2%. And of course, the interest rate reductions that you also alerted to, 1.25 percentage point worth of cumulative rate cuts since September of last year, has also added some additional tailwind to consumer fundamentals. So overarchingly, we have a conservative Reserve Bank with ambition to lower the inflation rate to a steady state 3%, is going to similarly behave conservatively over the ensuing quarters.
Then, Justin, when us as consumers are looking for new homes and dreaming about moving to bigger places, should we consider maybe fixing our interest rates with the banks, given that they do fluctuate from time to time? What are the positives and maybe some of the drawbacks of doing that?
So fixing interest rates in South Africa is not a common theme or thread. The average consumer looks at perhaps holding off on that. Holding on the fix. And when we saw post-COVID, when the interest rates were so low, banks were still pricing in higher than what the interest rate is because they need to forecast and ensure that they're covering themselves in the future. So the average South African usually does not fix their rates. It also depends on the consumer and how sensitive they are to that income repayment. So, the pros of fixing your rate is that you know what you're going to pay for your home loan over a 24, 36-month period. But then you will also, if we now are in a downward cycle interest rate, you're going to almost kick yourself because you could be paying less than what you fixed your interest rate at.
Gulam, before I let you go, it's official now. The SARB also emphasizing that 3% target in terms of inflation, saying they're likely to get there around 2027. What does that mean for the South African consumer, the lower inflation and possibly the lowering of interest rates in our economy?
So quite simply, over the near to medium term, in other words, over the next year or two, we may have slightly higher interest rates than would be the case if the Reserve Bank was targeting 4.5%. However, if this ambition to lower inflation expectations and the trend rate to 3% does come to pass, which I believe it will, then in subsequent years, in other words, 2027 onwards, it's quite plausible that South Africa will enjoy even lower steady state interest rates. Put differently, we pay a near to medium term price by having higher interest rates for the likelihood that in the subsequent years and over a far extended period, South Africa will enjoy lower trend interest rates. So short-term sacrifice for a near to medium-term, longer-term gain.
All right, that was Gulam Balim, Chief Economist at Standard Bank, also joined by Justin Eastrop, Provincial Sales Manager for Uber Home Loans, just dissecting those numbers that came through from the SARB. Not much changed. The repo rate at 7%, the prime lending rate, the rate at which banks charge you as a consumer, at 10.5%.
The Money Show.
The markets.
It's been interesting to look at the markets this afternoon and how they'd reacted to that particular decision. We're joined by Rudy van der Merwe, Portfolio Manager at Advice Works, talking to us about the numbers on the JSE today. Not much from the mining sector, down close to 1%. Industrials are also quite firmer today, with banking stocks up more than 0.5%. Rudy, welcome again to the Money Show. First, let's deal with the rand and interest rates decision. What is your feeling around the local currency? I think it's held off quite well. Hi, Rudy.
Sorry, Matteo. I think good evening. The rand firmed slightly this afternoon, 1737-ish at the moment. This morning it was about 1744. So no, not a major change. It does seem like, I think, parts of the market were possibly anticipating that we could see a cut today, and possibly that's what caused the rand to be slightly weaker this morning. Obviously, that turning out not to be the case means we're probably looking at longer rates for higher, and I think that's firmed the currency slightly in the afternoon session, but it doesn't have a very major impact at this stage.
Do you think the SARB's view of keeping rates unchanged and possibly doing that in November is going to put a little bit of a dampener on the JSE, which has had quite a good year, going past that 100,000 point mark this year?
It may well do so. The SARB is talking about this preferred target of 3%, which is certainly lower than current interest rates. So purely from that perspective, one can understand why they wouldn't have cut them. Just plainly state that inflation is currently higher than their preferred target of 3%, and in that case, they won't be cutting. But whether the target should be 3% or not is the larger question. And unfortunately, the bulk of what we get as inflation in South Africa comes from administered prices. It's prices that are passed through from government, prices like electricity, water, rates and taxes, fuel levies, government wages, and the like, have massive impact on inflation. And those are items that are beyond the control of the private sector and the general consumer. So if the SARB does want to get inflation down to 3%, it means it needs to squeeze the private sector and the average consumer, basically strangle them to death, so that the little bit of spending that they do that's outside of the government's control is hugely constrained and sort of under severe pressure to actually cause inflation to come down anymore. Whereas the target really should be to try and constrain the spending of government, or the increase in the cost of government spending. If you could constrain that to 3%, the target would make a lot more sense, but historically that's proven to be very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, the sub-governor, Lesetja Kganyago, today speaking around that NERSA correction of the electricity price, saying that power prices are likely to go up 8% now. That could drive up inflation, saying maybe it's government's turn to do the right things from their end, because they've been keeping their end of the bargain. But let's look at the JSE and how to perform today. The all-share up 55 points, not as buoyant as it's been all week. What are some of the drawbacks there in that mining index?
Yeah, actually today we've seen a bit of a pullback in certainly in the gold mining companies. Gold prices have come back very slightly. We did have a reasonable time in the last while on platinum. It's going to depend on the outlook here, where those prices go. Obviously, they're at very elevated levels after having a very strong sort of run up year to date. I suspect there's more capacity for them to head north from where they currently are. So the outlook, certainly for our precious metals commodity miners, still seems reasonable. At this stage, production levels are are growing reasonably well, and their balance sheets are on very good state as a result of higher commodity prices. And it looks like the continued uncertainty in global markets and in the global geopolitical situation is likely to be supportive of those prices, certainly for the foreseeable future, and that should play into their hands. So it's one of the sectors in our market that is still looking reasonably attractive in my view.
Better day for Valterra, the platinum producer. Mr. Price as well getting in on some of the gains. Are any market movements that piqued your interest today?
No, I think the main focus really for the day has been on the interest rate decision, and I think that was very much sort of anticipated. A lot of hope placed on further cuts at this stage. Certainly seems like we've got longer to wait. Unfortunately, the inflation targeting that they're talking about, or the inflation forecasts from the Reserve Bank themselves, are looking like the rates in the short term are going to rise further. So we're certainly at risk of if those rates stay elevated, or inflation rates stay elevated for a prolonged period, interest rates could head in the other direction. I think that's something the market's trying to digest at this stage. Other than that, from a corporate news perspective, we had a very quiet day. There was a trading statement by Bytes, basically indicating that numbers are likely to be much in line with previous numbers, which were on quite a high base. So I don't think we're going to see a very significant change in the profits in the short term. I think the long-term prospects are still reasonable for that company to produce reasonable growth.
The US are starting their cutting cycle, if you will, by 25 basis points, quite shy from the US Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Do you expect a renewed resurgence of the dollar as a result?
No, I don't think so. The dollar has been certainly under pressure this year. It's probably lost 10% or so against other currencies. There continues to be a lot of uncertainty around policy in the US and the direction of that policy. So I don't think we're going to see a massive amount of confidence return in the short term. US asset prices, other than the dollar, so the share prices have actually been quite attractive, and that's mainly been on the back of excitement about the artificial intelligence space.
Yeah.
The outlook for interest rates in the US here is a bit murky. There's a lot of people that are concerned about stagflation in the US, so that we might get, even while that economy is slowing, inflation can keep accelerating, which makes it very difficult for the Fed to get aggressive on any other on further cuts. If long-term rates are rising and they've got a massive amount of debt to fund, which is going to keep pressure on those longer-term rates to rise further. So I quite honestly would not be surprised if we've seen the end of the US cutting cycle for the moment.
All right, that was Rudy van der Merwe, portfolio manager at Advice Works, breaking down the markets for us. A lot of quiet in terms of company news, but most of the reaction coming from the SARB's decision to hold rates at 7%. 10.5% for the prime lending rate. Valterra enjoying gains of 5%. Karoo, the Internet of Things business, up 4.8%. Tiger Brands up 2.7%, with Aspen Pharmacare also up more than 2%. Paper and packaging company Sappi down 7%. MTN Group amongst the losers, down 3.5%, with Old Mutual also down 2.5%. Those were the markets. Time now is 7:30. Dominic Majola with your Eyewitness News.
Thanks, Mateo, and good evening. KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has provided context on the arrest of the crime intelligence boss Dumisani Khumalo as he fights to have his bail conditions relaxed so he can return back to work. Khumalo and 6 others were arrested in July by members of Independent Directorate Against Corruption on charges of fraud and corruption. This relates to the appointment of Dineo Mukwele into a senior position within crime intelligence without having any previous policing experience. Mkhwanazi is testifying on day 2 of the Madlanga inquiry in Pretoria. Oren Singh has more.
Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi alleges members of Parliament Fadel Adams and Diane Collar Barnard abused their powers in interfering in matters relating to crime intelligence. He suggests Adams' move of registering cases of fraud and corruption in Cape Town and Soweto against crime intelligence boss Dumisani Khumalo was a result of him being privy to secret information, and he abused his powers of being an MP to get hold of this. Mkonazi says the arrest of Khumalo saw the work of the Political Killings Task Team, who were assisting counterintelligence operations in Gauteng, come to a halt.
The arrest of Gerald Khumalo. When this arrest happens, it literally means this project must stop. This investigation of this organized crime must stop immediately because the people are arrested.
Khumalo is currently fighting to allow his bail conditions to be relaxed so he can return back to work. Arun Singh, Eyewitness News.
The Western Cape Mobility Department says no incidents have been reported so far on day 2 of the taxi route shutdown in Heidelberg. The route closure between Mfuleni and Khayelitsha to Somerset West have been put in place for 30 days to curb recent taxi-related violence. At least 10 operators and commuters have been shot dead or injured in attacks linked to a dispute over these routes between taxi associations Qatar and Codeta. Yesterday, 6 minibus taxis were impounded for illegally operating on the closed routes. Provincial Mobility MEC Isaac Selego says the routes are relatively calm today.
We have increased the capacity of alternative transport, Golden Arrow buses in particular. The deployment of law enforcement agencies remains in place, and we continue to monitor the enforcement of measures. My door remains open for dialogue with the 2 affected associations to resolve this impasse and reach sustainable resolution.
The Cape Crime Crisis Coalition hosted an interfaith gathering at a mosque in Mitchell's Plain today related to ongoing gang violence in the Western Cape. Religious leaders gathered in the Cape Town Centre Mosque before holding a prayer vigil outside Mitchell's Plain police station. Just last night, 3 people were shot dead in West Ridge, Mitchell's Plain in a suspected gang-related incident. Carlo Peterson has more.
Bishop Mark Bloomstein from the True North congregation in Mitchell's Plain says a plan is being developed to tackle gang violence in the area. Bloomstein has been instrumental in formulating the Mitchell's Plain Safety Development Plan along with various stakeholders.
The message is being developed. Soon it's going to make public space, and soon the community is going to hear of it. But they know, they've heard many messages before. They need to start seeing the implementation of it.
Bloomstein says religious leaders will be providing support to police and social services by mentoring young people in the community. The bishop says the plan is set to be launched in Mitchell's Plain first, but will also be rolled out to other gang hotspots in the Western Cape. Carlo Peterson, Eyewitness News, Mitchell's Plain.
Parliamentary members of the opposition benches have expressed outrage after learning of a major, more than 150 million rand budget shortfall for the G20 Leaders Summit that will take place in Johannesburg in November. The International Relations Department made the revelations yesterday during a portfolio committee meeting as parties questioned the value of having hosted the presidency of the body to ordinary South Africans. Government has allocated a budget of 700 million rand to host this year-long event, but the MK Party's Wesley Douglas says heads must roll for the last-minute budget. Lindsay Datlinger reports.
Now in the final 80 days of hosting the prestigious World Bloc, International Relations Chief Director Dave Malcolmson says getting Johannesburg infrastructure up to scratch around Sandton and Nasrec, where the Leaders Summit will be held, is still a work in progress. But he says budget constraints pose a major risk to the successful hosting of the final event. The EFF's Robile Mhlongo, however, took a dim view of this admission when previously it was said South Africa would spend far less than Brazil did last year.
Why wait towards this late stage to indicate that really the budget that was initially allocated is not enough?
The MK Party's Wesley Douglas agreed.
How can a counting officer not see that there's going to be a 153 million rand shortfall? If you didn't see that and now we've got to foot that bill as a taxpayer, then you have not done your job. You must be held accountable.
Malcolmson said talks were ongoing with Treasury and the Sponsorship Committee to find the money, with the G20 Social Summit also to be held in November, not completely funded. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News, Parliament.
A fine Friday in store for Gauteng tomorrow. Temperatures will drop to overnight lows of 5 degrees, a peak at 10 degrees, and a peak at alternating heights of 28 and 29 degrees. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour, KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has provided context on the arrest of crime intelligence boss Dumisani Khumalo as he fights to have his bail conditions relaxed so he can return back to work.
EWN Traffic.
Well, at this stage, if you are traveling through Soweto, you can expect delays in Protea Glen on the N12 westbound approaching the R558. Also, Devlin, we still have roadwork slowing down traffic. This is on the Golden Highway between the N1 and Union Avenue. Otherwise, the rest of Gauteng not looking too bad. Free-flowing traffic on our highways. No serious accidents have been reported at this hour. However, in the mother city, traffic remains congested. This is on the M5 southbound between Pinelands and Rondebosch. Also on Nelson Mandela Boulevard, outbound traffic is heavily backed up. This is approaching Rondebloem. If you come across any other traffic issues, please WhatsApp us on 072-702-1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
Beyond every boardroom is a story waiting to be written. A story of a business and its potential, of a community that thrives, a hospital that serves, and energy that powers millions of dreams. It's a story that only gets better with a partner that has the expertise and solutions to make it a reality. At ABSA CIB, we are invested in your story, and we invite you to write it with us, because your story matters. ABSA, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
What do partners of the Gates Foundation do when facing the world's toughest challenges? They keep going. From discovering a plastic drape that helps detect excessive postpartum bleeding faster, to developing better bed nets to kill malaria-carrying mosquitoes, to researching an RSV vaccine that could save hundreds of thousands of children. For every problem, there are people who prove that progress is possible. The Gates Foundation, partners of human potential. Learn more at gatesfoundation.org/keep going.
This is your business. This is your business supercharged with the help of zero counting software. These are your numbers. These are your numbers sorted with the help of zero counting software. This is you.
Hi.
This is you taking business where you want with the help of zero counting software. This is your business supercharged with the help of Zero and having your numbers sorted all at the same time so you can finally focus on taking business where you want to. Supercharge your business today with the help of Zero.
Search Zero with an S.
EWN Sport.
Tolagele Mganga joining us for the sporting action this evening. The World Athletics Championships, a lot of action there. Couldn't quite catch the races. What's happened?
Well, Mateo, we start with the South African update from that event. Zekiti Nene took 5th place in the men's 400-meter final in a time of 44.55 seconds, while Sinosipho Dambile ran a personal best of 19.97 seconds to qualify for the men's 200-meter final. In the 800 meters, it was disappointment for world indoor champion Prudence Shikhodisho, who didn't manage to finish due to an injury. Switching over to cricket, where the Proteas women will have a further opportunity to boost their confidence. That's ahead of the World Cup, with a series win over Pakistan. Having won the first ODI by 8 wickets, Tasman Britt says tomorrow's second game offers them a perfect chance to fine-tune their preparations.
It's great that we're having a series like this before the World Cup, but I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be in a good space. You want confidence, whether you're bowler or batter, or maybe just the team in general. Like Kapi and I, when we made that record-breaking partnership, to be able to actually tick that and see like, okay, we are capable of doing that and maybe feeding that off to the middle order and what is expected. I just think in general, it's, ticking extra boxes where it's not just your average, you win the game, but it's how do you win the game.
Match day 1 of the UEFA Champions League concludes this evening with 6 games scheduled, including Manchester City's clash with Napoli. Antonio Conte has lauded Pep Guardiola for the work he's done with the citizens.
Pep to stay for 10 years in the same club is incredible. It means that there is a great synergy, great energy between him and the club and the players. But we are talking about, in my opinion, the best coach in the world, yes.
Barcelona will be without Lamine Yamal for their clash against Newcastle, but Hansi Flick is confident that Marcus Rashford will be a capable replacement.
We know that Lamine is not playing today, maybe not on Sunday, but at the end, we have a strong team. We have a strong team also on this position, and we have Marcus Rashford in our team, and it was like that because if someone from in front cannot play, he can play, and he showed it also on Sunday how good he is. And I also hope that he can show in England the same performance he did on Sunday.
And Raymond Daga has announced his 21-man squad for the Under-20 FIFA World Cup, but there's no place for Mbegezeli Mbogazi and Chandre Campbell. The tournament falls outside the FIFA calendar, so clubs aren't obliged to release their players. Without them, Amajita will play group games against France, the United States of America and New Caledonia. Tolagele Mganga, Eyewitness News Sport.
This is Jade. She'll spend hours comparing almond milk and once made a spreadsheet just for sneakers. But when she found Santam, SA's leading short-term insurer that offers a range of cover options, from vehicle to building and home contents, even she didn't overthink it. The kind of freedom Santam gives you takes some getting used to. Speak to your broker. Santam, this is freedom. Santam is an authorized FSP, a licensed non-life insurer and controlling company for its group companies.
SPAR brings you super savings. Get 750 gram, 780 gram, 850 gram Nola mayonnaise, excluding squeeze bottle, for $38.99. Save R6 with SPAR rewards, or 2-liter SPAR full cream or low-fat ultra-pasteurized milk for $32.99 with SPAR rewards. Plus, you could win your share of R6 million in instant cash. Price is valid until 22 September 2025. While stocks last. T's and C's apply.
Small businesses are anything but small. They're the backbone of our communities, the dreamers, the doers, the ones who keep Mzansi moving forward. That's why 702 and Capitec Business Banking are putting them in the spotlight. Every Thursday between 6 and 8 p.m., catch Small Business Focus with Capitec, where we showcase the hustle, heart, and the secrets to thriving in today's economy. Your vision matters, and with Capitec, you're never building it alone. Small Business Focus with Capitec, the business bank for everyone. Thursdays between 6 and 8 p.m. on 702. Capitec Bank is an authorized FSP 46669.
702 and K-Talk. Moteo is on The Money Show.
Welcome back to The Money Show. If you've had a hectic day today and you've missed out on everything that's happened, all you need to know is that the SARB has left interest rates unchanged, so no cut today. The penultimate decision before the one in November. The repo rate stays at 7%. 10.5% is your prime lending rate. So sort out your budgets accordingly. We've had a WhatsApp from one of our listeners, Eric, saying he's happy about the repo rate staying unchanged. He says, I'm a pensioner, so it's part of my income. Then looking at another conversation now around banks. And I want you to think about the use of your apps and how fintech has changed our lives and how more and more of us are using less and less cash. Now, banks are currently evolving, transforming to become world banking leaders around the world. The global survey conducted on behalf of KPMG International showing that bank leaders shared the areas they believe will be the greatest strategic performances over the next 2 years. So a lot of our banks are looking to change the way they do things and at the same time save themselves money and at least, of course, make more money. August Claude Ngwetsop, the financial services sector leader at KPMG Southern Africa, joining us for this conversation. What would you say are the top 3 concerns for the banking leaders around the world?
Sure. Thank you, Mateo, for having me on the show, and a very good evening to your listeners. And yes, so to your question about the top 3 concerns, right, of bank leaders across the world. So what our survey actually showed, we actually interviewed more than 250 banks across the world, and 3 key area of concern came up, right? The first one is really that the banks are struggling to remain competitive, right, to really keep a high margin on the operation. The second key concern we found as well is that, those banks are really looking at ways to use AI to automate the operation to better service customers. So really trying to use AI more. The third one was really something that we found that key area is that is digital everywhere, right? Digital banking is really everywhere today. In our apps, you mentioned the apps in the banking space. So banks really are looking to use digital advances from data sciences to provide more digital services. And on the back of that, of course, you have to handle cyber risk and cyber threats, right? This is really what we found our survey across the world. Yes.
Here in South Africa, the trend has really been, doing away more and more with ATMs. So withdrawing cash, something that's likely to be a thing of the past. There's more banks cut out the ATM rollouts, but also, going into a branch and doing your banking has become a thing of the past as well, because we're either on our laptops or on our phones. Is this a trend that you're seeing around the world, that people are looking to more digital banking, and who are some of the leaders in terms of that space?
No, you're absolutely right, Matteo. So that trend that we see in our market here, where there's really a tendency to operate without any cash, that's really something we're seeing across the world. And something on the back of that is really something which is maybe not yet here in our SA market, is the growth of what we call digital currency or cryptocurrency, which is really something on the back of all these trends where, the historical pattern of engaging with money is changing across the world, or the banking space is changing across the world. So that is really a trend that's going to, from our observation, that's going to stay and basically be here with us for a long time. There's a small difference I want you to mention maybe here is that, in the rest of the world or more advanced markets, that trend, the cashless society is more advanced. So there's less innovation in the payment space, for instance, right, in the rest of the world compared to emerging markets, our markets, for instance. So this is really the small trend we're seeing here, small differences, where we could say that, payment, we have a bit more fintech payment here on the continent, but on AI or digital currency, the rest of the world is slightly ahead of us. Yes.
When we look at the embedding of artificial intelligence in the banking sector, of course, these businesses are there to make money. So is this AI going to be used for customer relations? You will be chatting to a bot about your account and what you'd like to do, or are they going to be using the AI so that we as customers get a better experience when we're on their platforms?
No, I think Matteo, this is really a very interesting point, and I think we're already familiar with chatbots, right? In the way we interact with banking today, so we already know what banks are already doing to use AI to enable and make our interaction a bit easier or more friendly. So it's already there. What is coming really is that we have now AI used beyond that. So AI used to help banks actually originate new products, right? So you can actually use AI to look at the bank's balance sheet, and from there you can derive some specific products you can actually use to help the banks better manage their risk, for instance. So it's really that advance in AI that we're seeing here, where AI goes beyond just the automation of tasks to actually creating something. We saw it with what is called more and more either agentic AI or generative AI, both of them creating products for us. So it's really moving beyond that. I think one concern we're seeing as well is that we think AI may actually take away jobs from us, and that concern is really there. But when you look historically, advances like AI, it actually tend to create more opportunities for banks and for us, for customers, to be more productive. So there's really an element there of course of fear, but also of large promise to do quite a lot using AI.
Then just finally, looking at the new agenda, the banking transformation survey of KPMG International, a lot of the respondents, around 82%, say they plan to reduce their cost base by more than 10% by 2030. Now, reducing of cost could be a lot of things. Looking at the banking sector, where do you think they're going to be shaving?
That's a very, very interesting one. And look, what we're seeing, I will just mention three or four key things, right? So when you look at the banks, for instance, today, what we're seeing is that large part of the cost of banks are in infrastructures, right? In basically your technologies. So you have large core banking systems that are used to run banks, large trading systems for treasury system like Murex, which is used by large banks to run trading operation. So what we see is that those are massive programs in banks that cost a lot. So when banks try to reduce costs, they tend to actually see how they could automate more the services by by using technology and reducing costs around using technology around that part. So technology cost reduction is one part. Secondly, it's of course, human resources is to see how we can use less people to do the same work. This is really what AI is enabling. So second part there. I think the third part, which we think is also quite important, is the fact that when you are moving digital, you basically need less and less physical infrastructures. You don't have branches, so that also reduces cost, in the bank's operation. So all those together actually help banks to reduce their cost and service clients without actually affecting too much how we experience our connection with our banks.
All right, the banking sector moving towards a cashless society, but also looking to cut costs. So that could mean a lot of jobs lost in the market. Augusti Claude Ngwetop, financial services sector leader at KPMG, Southern Africa. Ready to lead and make our world a better place, Regenesis School of Education proudly launches its revolutionary Bachelor of Education program. They don't just develop teachers, they develop conscious leaders equipped with IQ, STEM, AI, and emotional intelligence. Study in the heart of Sandton or online worldwide with a world-class faculty trusted by over 1,000 corporations and 500,000 alumni from 150 countries. Enroll now at regenesis.net/education. Regenesis School of Education, awakening potential.
Working capital deployed on demand to unlock liquidity and fuel your balance sheet performance.
Ready, set, cash flow. Corporate banking from RMB. RMB, a division of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized FSP and credit provider.
One degree defines you as a master of business, the MBA. The life-changing Gibbs MBA empowers you to lead an organization or start your own business within the dynamic African context. Choose from 90 electives and 8 focus areas: general management, entrepreneurship, consulting, manufacturing, digital, humane leadership, healthcare, and climate leadership. For our next information session, go to gibbs.co.za/MBA. Gibbs is a Triple Crown internationally accredited business school in Ilovo, Sandton.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
On 7 minutes to 7 now, let's talk about a very concerning story that came from the market today. Drinks giant Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa says it's in talks with worker unions ahead of a company restructuring process. You know what that means. There will be some jobs lost in the market. The firm, which employs over 7,000 workers, is set to let go of some more than 600 employees. According to the Business Day, the Food and Allied Workers Union has received a Section 189 notice informing workers of those retrenchments. Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa says it's going through a restructuring process due to evolving industry dynamics. Now, let's look at the South African job space at the back of that story. A very tough market, low growth, very hard to create jobs in, and a lot of people quite strained in terms of unemployment. Joining me for this conversation, Andrew Levy, Labour economists, are joining us here, and Zanele Sabela, COSATU national spokesperson. Andrew, I think let's start with you. Another big corporate letting go of workers as well in the South African economy. It hasn't been easy to operate in because of that low growth. How will this affect the jobs numbers in the country?
It's going to have a disastrous effect overall, but obviously in terms of the individual hardships for people and families who lose their jobs. But if we take a step back and we try and say why, what's happening, then there are a number of factors here which are terribly important. Now, we know our economic performance has been poor, the growth has been low. We know that the world has been through a difficult time from an economic point of view. But I think the key fact, if we look at the companies that have announced very, very large retrenchments in the last 10 days, 2 weeks, we've got the ongoing ArcelorMittal story.
Yeah.
We've got Glencore. Yesterday we had Ford, and now we have Coca-Cola. And I think that in many respects, an answer to this lies more in immediate short-term political alliances and the perception of the Western companies, and these are all Western companies, and their investments in South Africa, that there are more attractive places to put your money. Now, if you add to the inherent structural problems of poor logistics, an electricity supply which cannot be guaranteed, potential problems and actual problems with water and corruption, then people are saying, is this an environment in which we want to be? Add to that the fact that our productivity continues to fall, means that we become more and more competitive, more uncompetitive with countries, if we're looking at steel, for example, like China, who don't have the world's finest record when it comes to worker rights or decent wages. But, employers and businesses buy in the best market. But I think the thing for international companies, which is making them very, very edgy, is the fact that the South African government, particularly the ANC, not so much the GNU part, the DA, have made clear statements that their friends are not with the Western world. Their friends are with Russia and China and North Korea, with Iran, and places that the West really has difficulties with.
And that could hurt our investment in the country. So, Zanele,
exactly.
Let's bring you in here into this conversation. What are the companies firstly saying about the South African economy and the market at the moment and how it's looking? And what are the workers telling you in terms of just being nervous for losing their jobs in this market?
Hi, Mutho. Thank you so much for having us. So what the companies have said, Andrew has alluded to it. Glencore and ArcelorMittal have actually spoken about the very high energy costs in this country. We'll know that Eskom has been having a hard time, but then there's also those price hikes that are actually quite astronomical. But then also adding to that is the recent problem with NERSA and its miscalculation, and that will obviously add to the problems. ArcelorMittal has also said that it has problems with transporting costs. I mean, Transnet's been having quite a time of late. They're trying to fix that. Eskom is almost on the way to recovery, but the fact that, those very high energy costs are an extra burden on companies doesn't quite help. In terms of workers obviously are very nervous. We're very nervous also, looking at what has been coming out of late. The latest one with Coca-Cola, it is actually worrying that those 680 positions are actually mostly cleaners. And these are amongst the most vulnerable of workers. And so that is very worrying because if these are the most vulnerable of workers, meaning in terms of the total, spend on pay, they are not the ones that are taking too much.
The most expensive, yes.
Exactly, they're not the most expensive. So then it makes you wonder, what is it? And FAO is right to be so upset that the company is now trying to get to workers individually when Coca-Cola has been in this country for a long time and they know how our Labor Relations Act works. There needs to be consultation. It's a 60-day process. There are no shortcuts around it. And you'll know that with Goodyear shut its doors and offered its employees a certain package. NUMSA went in there and was able to negotiate for a higher package than was originally offered. So you'll see that what Coca-Cola is doing by going to the workers directly is actually not right and shouldn't be happening.
That was Zanele Sabela Kosatu, national spokesperson. Andrew Levy, labor economist, talking about just how tough it is in the South African economy to keep a job and also to create one.
This is EWN.
Good evening, I'm Dominic Machola.
DA Member of Parliament Diane Kohler has denied allegations that she made classified intelligence public during her second day of the testimony at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry this afternoon. KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi implicated several high-ranking officials in alleged crime within the criminal justice system. Although she serves on Parliament's Joint Committee for Intelligence, its members are prohibited from disclosing classified information. In June, Kohler issued a DA media statement revealing that the Inspector General of Intelligence had completed a probe into alleged unlawful property acquisitions. Mkhwanazi has argued before the inquiry this afternoon that by releasing classified details, Kohler Barnard had undermined staff intelligence.
So what we see here is a person who has a legal obligation to keep the mouth shut and go to the Joint Steering Committee and present and ventilate on this and hold the divisional commission accountable. The risk of these commissioners is that it forces the members that are within crime intelligence in the public space to defend themselves by divulging all the secrets of the states that they are aware of.
In a statement issued this afternoon, Kohler denied the accusations, calling them outrageous, defamatory and entirely baseless. The Commission has wrapped up proceedings for the day and will resume tomorrow. For live updates on the Commission, visit ewn.co.za or watch live proceedings on our YouTube channel. Meanwhile, there are no more hurdles before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry after the Protea High Court ruled in favor of President Cyril Ramaphosa today in the MK Party's urgent court bid. A full bench heard arguments on whether the matter should be heard urgently and decide to struck it off the roll for lack of urgency. The MK Party approached the court in a bid to halt the commission, which kicked off yesterday. The party believes the inquiry is unconstitutional and also challenges the appointment of Professor Feroz Kachalia as police minister. Khomotso Modise has more.
A full bench of the Pretoria High Court has found that the matter before it, brought by the MK Party, requires careful judicial consideration, and rushing it through the urgent court will not be in the interest of justice. The judgment was read by Judge Ronald Dolme.
At least the country can rest assured that something is indeed being done to protect the public from any further malfeasance.
She says there is substantial redress for the MK Party if the president's executive decision is found to be unlawful.
The court is empowered to grant a just and equitable remedy in due course.
Now that the matter has been struck from the urgent court roll, it's likely to be enrolled on the ordinary court roll, which may take months for it to be heard. Khomotso Modise, Eyewitness News at the Pretoria High Court.
Police have opened a case of murder following the assassination of Gauteng chairperson of the National Taxi Alliance. 58-year-old Thamsanqa Moyo was gunned down earlier today while travelling along the Soweto highway. Police say the motive for the incident is unknown at this stage, but have not ruled out taxi industry-related violence. Thandoluhle Ngcobo filed this report.
Police say chairperson of the Gauteng National Taxi Alliance, Thamsanqa Moyo, was travelling alone when his car was blocked by a minibus taxi and a small car along the busy highway in Soweto. It's understood that the armed suspects proceeded to open fire at Moyo's silver grey Toyota Bakkie. Police spokesperson Mavela Masondo.
The suspects then fired several shots towards the victim.
He says the number of suspects has not yet been determined and a manhunt is underway. Officers have cleared the scene and have loaded his car riddled with bullet holes to be taken in for further forensic investigation. Thandoluhle Ngcobo, Eyewitness News.
Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen believes the United States' new trade tariffs will threaten global food security. Steenhuisen is hosting the G20 Agriculture Working Group and Food Security Task Force ministerial meeting, currently underway in Somerset West. Speaking on the sidelines, Steenhuisen said he expects climate change and sustainable development matters to be the greatest sticking point in reaching consensus. Lindsay Datlinger reports.
Minister John Steenhuisen says food insecurity and malnutrition remain priority concerns for his department. Added to this is the impact of climate change in addressing these concerns.
It's the single biggest threat to agriculture, and climate volatility affects smallholder farmers and subsistence farmers the most.
While trade tariffs are not specifically up for discussion at these meetings, Steenhuisen says discussions about farming for the future cannot ignore the impact of tariffs. He believes government has put a broad and generous offer to the US in efforts to drive down the 30% tariff imposed by Washington.
I think we're seeing tariffs moving beyond just trade towards a bent of geopolitics. And I think that is going to fundamentally change the way in which the trade infrastructure works across the globe.
Steenhuisen says the shift in global trade relations is going to cast the spotlight on the role of the World Trade Organization. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News.
Gold is trading at $3,645.72 an ounce. The rand is at 17.36 to the dollar, 23.53 to the pound, 20.44 to the euro. Brent crude oil is at $66.99 a barrel.
Road report, slow-moving traffic heading towards El Rato, and that's on Randfontein Road between Milestalker and Adcock, while in the mother city we still have slow-moving traffic on Nelson Mandela Boulevard. This is outbound approaching Rondo Bloom. There's also slow-moving traffic into outbound between Mowbray Main and Airport Approach Road.
A fine Friday in store for Gauteng tomorrow. Johannesburg will drop to overnight lows of 8 degrees and peak and highs of 28. Pretoria 10 and 29. Vereeniging 5, also reaching highs of 29 degrees. Clear skies in Cape Town as well tomorrow, along with the moderate southeasterly winds at a low of 11 degrees and a high of 24 degrees. The top story in EWN this hour. A Member of Parliament, Diana Kohler, has denied allegations that she made classified intelligence public.
EWN, in touch, in tune, and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app.
And now, The Money Show with Motheo Haripe.
On 702. Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply. Now, South Africa is seeing a massive rise in gambling and betting, with increased calls for regulation gripping the industry. It's now an industry that's up to 150 billion rand and rising. People are gambling on their phones, whether it's on football or playing the lotto, through your banking app. It's really something that's shaken the industry. Yes, more money is being spent, some people getting into debt, maybe some winners as well, but it's also a tech interest because it's all happening online. We're now joined by Siphumelele Zondi on our Tech Thursday to look at some of these issues. Siphumelele, welcome to The Money Show.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me again, Motheo.
Any betting apps on your phone? Something?
No,
are you a betting
definitely
man?
not. I'm trying to stay far away.
No, it's become a trend. Look, you look left, you look right. Somebody's on their app putting money on something, whether it's sports, soccer, athletics, or maybe even gambling through casinos online. It's a good thing for the gambling industry, but could be quite dangerous for consumers who are not wary.
Oh, yeah, totally. That's the thing, right? Because while there's popularity of it, and I think signs are everywhere that there's popularity of it, there's also worry in terms of where the money could be coming from. Old Mutual has actually said that quite a lot of people, you'd find that are borrowing money in order for them to gamble, or have had to sell some stuff that they might have around in the house. And even the Lancet Commission has also said that gambling possibly needs to be treated in the same way as alcohol and tobacco, as a health issue as well, and not just as a sport, and not just as a technology issue, and not just as entertainment, but we should also then look at public health as well, because of the worries that you are raising there, Motheo, and the fact that it can lead to some mental health issues associated with gambling or sports betting, which is also a form of gambling, by the way.
I mean, on the other end, you would say that developers in the country have done well to attract those eyes to our smartphones, to say you can have, a gaming platform that's on your phone, that's monetized and connected to your bank. The technology is definitely working.
The technology is definitely working. It also, I suppose, would be a casino in your pocket, if you will. It removes the stigma that people had in the past of spending hours and hours out in casinos, in public spaces where they'd be exposed. But we do know how algorithm works, because algorithm essentially tries to keep you on whichever platform that you could be using. And it's the same here with these sports betting platforms and other gambling platforms, where the algorithm is going to try and figure out what your interests are, what's likely going to keep you on. And sometimes if you win the smallest bit of money, you might, algorithm again is going to come into play to say, well, hold on, you might win more if you take that money and put it right back in. So it's algorithm really at work that trying to keep people on and make sure that they don't get away as easily, and that they do bet on their favorite sports teams.
Are these algorithms going unchecked? I mean, who's regulating whether they are making sure that you lose more and more money? I mean, drawing you in, giving you a carrot on the stick, maybe winning 200 there, but losing essentially 5,000 at the end of it.
As we do know with most technologies, that legislation often follows the technology. So technology comes first. Sometimes you realize that there's a crisis later, and then what you'll find is that then legislation would want to come in and step in there. And also, there isn't really a national space, a national body where these platforms can register under. So it's sort of like fragmented a bit at the moment as well, because you find that a lot of people are into sports betting. Mpumalanga makes the most amount of money, but it's also because the permits, most of the permits are issued from Mpumalanga, followed by the Western Cape again, because a lot of the permits are issued from the Western Cape, and then Gauteng comes third there. But it's because of that fragmentation as opposed to a control that could be nationwide on legislation that could be overlooking at what's happening in this particular space, in order for people not to be lured in and find themselves in problems and in crisis sometimes.
Yeah, and there could be some crisis if people use their salaries to gamble, because if you lose that, then you start getting into a very, very big debt spiral. Your mental health is affected. And again, speaking to how we use technology as people, we've seen these play out on social media, how people are bullied using technology. So what could be the assessing of government in terms of policy to make sure that people are protected? Because a lot of people will tell you, we want to be self-reliant. We want to make sure that we make our own decision. They tell you the same things when we talk about things like vices, like smoking and drinking. It would be the same in this case.
I suppose you also don't want a situation where you have a huge chunk of the population losing all their salaries, and because that means their money is not being put into investments, their money is not being put into things that are going to take care of them. And in South Africa, while there might not be as much regulation, you find that we are still sort of like in the teasing stage of things, because when you look at, for example, the NFL in America, which is a massive show beyond the sports, you even are able to bet on the entertainment that's going to be taking place. Will this person appear? Will that person not appear? Perhaps will there be an engagement on the Taylor Swift situation all around the NFL in the US? So it goes even here. It would still be just on the sports match. It wouldn't be on who's performing at halftime, for example. If you think about the final that took place over the weekend, you wouldn't be betting on those little bits and who would be performing there. Whereas in America, it's even gone to that extent. And I suppose maybe this is where our legislators could come in to say, where do we stop? Do we allow it to grow to a level that it's grown in the United States of America and possibly other parts of the world, because you might think about the amount of revenue that the industry is putting in as well, because there is a huge amount of money, and one a study that I was reading was saying it's about 1% of GDP that's now coming in from gambling or sports betting in South Africa. So they might defend themselves and say, well, money is coming in from the industry. So,
But what's the
as
responsibility then of the industry in terms of making sure that those that do play do so responsibly? Maybe are we seeing technologies where there's a capping of an account that where they see somebody spending well over 20,000 Rand a month on betting?
Well, not yet. Interestingly enough, I actually read of a case out in the UK where the man said he received close to £1 million, but he didn't get it because it started. And actually, on the contrary, it's the opposite that started to happen, to the point that he lost it all again, because he said the industry started to, or people from within the sports betting organization started to call him on a daily basis. We have this to offer, we have that to offer. Do you not want to try that? Eventually, after day 5 of receiving phone calls, he put the money back in. And again, I suppose it goes back to what you're saying, the responsibility that as the industry grows, as we've realized that there's been apparently over 50% growth from 2023-24 from the year prior to that the industry itself might have to have some sort of self-regulation as well to, in a way, control and protect its clients, because it's its clients that whose well-being needs to be looked after.
Things are getting quite dangerous in terms of overspend on online gambling in South Africa. It's Phumelele Zondi, the tech expert, joining us for our Tech Thursday.
Beyond every boardroom is a story waiting to be written. A story of a business and its potential, of a community that thrives, a hospital that serves, and energy that powers millions of dreams. It's a story that only gets better with a partner that has the expertise and solutions to make it a reality. At Absa CIB, we are invested in your story, and we invite you to write it with us, because your story matters. Absa, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
This is the story of our Nando's Flame Grilled Chicken, marinated for 24 hours in our unique peri-peri recipe. Kissed by fire, full of flavor, perfectly grilled. And like any story, this story of our full peri-peri chicken has 2 sides. Yours to choose, yours to share. Enjoy the Nando's full and 2 sharing meal. That's our full chicken and 2 sharing sides of your choice for only 277 Rand.
There's something magical about booking your next getaway. Whether you're flying for business or leisure, Airlink is ready to take you there in premium comfort. With over 45 destinations in 15 African countries, Airlink connects you throughout Southern Africa and beyond. No middle seats, just wider window or aisle seating. And yes, free luggage, snacks and beverages are still our thing. Plus, our Skybucks frequent flyer program rewards you every time you fly. Book on flyairlink.com or your travel agent. Fly Airlink, the freedom of the African sky.
1 festival, endless flavor, and 2 unforgettable days of timeless music. The DSTV Delicious International Food and Music Festival, powered by Lotto Star, returns on 20 and 21 September at Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit. On Saturday, the stage erupts with Don Toliver, Questa, and Nkabi Zezwe. Then on Sunday, experience the legendary Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, Lyra, and more. The DSTV Delicious Festival, powered by Lotto Star. Tickets at Ticketmaster.
The Money Show. Small Business Focus.
Small Business Focus is brought to you by Capitec. Start up or scale up with Capitec, the business bank for everyone. Thank you for joining us for a Small Business Focus. Tonight, talking influencers, the big money that comes through there, but also the big tax risk. Now, South Africa's influencer economy is indeed booming, and it's not just brands that are taking notice. It's also SARS, the revenue collector, also paying attention. Digital marketing expenditure in South Africa set to surpass 14.5 billion Rand this year. As the industry expands, online influencers are emerging as key economic drivers as well in their own right, cashing in on substantial earnings. Let's chat now to Luncedo Mtwentwe, Managing Director at Vantage Advisory. Luncedo, small business influencers, you can't separate the two. Influencers are business owners in their own right, but now also attracting SARS's attention.
No, absolutely. Good evening, Montero. You actually spot on. One has to take this back, of course. If you remember, during the budget speech, SARS was, provided additional about 7.5 billion rands, 8 billion rands. And as a result of that, I mean, they were clear to say there's a lot more money that SARS has to collect in the economy. And there's more investment around AI. There's more investment as well on data analytics. And of course, trying to get more taxpayers to pay their taxes. And influencers are actually just one segment that has come through quite a lot for the past few years, that they are contributing quite a lot into the economy. I mean, over 500 million rands that is being contributed by the influencers into the economy. So therefore, in that particular case, SARS is saying, look, if there is value that is being created, and you've got this new segment of taxpayers that are generating income for themselves. Therefore, the tax law in South Africa, the income tax, is clear that if you are a citizen of this country and you are carrying on an activity that continuously generates you income, therefore you have to declare that income to South African Revenue Services and pay your fair share of taxes. And that's what SARS is currently saying, to say, look, this is within the ambit of the law. This is within what the Act says we must do, that each and every taxpayer in South Africa that is generating income regularly, so they must declare that income in addition, of course, of some of the folks that are, working 8 to 5. Those ones are being taxed on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
But if you're generating extra income, you still have that obligation to declare that.
For somebody who doesn't understand how this particular world works, a social media influencer, what does that look like and how do they earn their keep?
Yeah, so what we've picked up for the past few years, as I said, this is a movement, of course, that has taken the world by storm, especially the marketing and advertising industry, the branding, the products, the marketing of some products. So therefore, you've got, of course, individuals that are using different sort of social medias, channels to sell their products, to generate or to partner with different brands, and therefore they get paid for that. And sometimes they get paid in cash, or sometimes they get paid in kind. It's either, for instance, let's take a hotel, it will give you a stay for like a week or so. There is value that you've generated for that. That is an income, not of course in cash, but in kind. So therefore, all of that income, all of these partnerships where there's value that is being created, at the end of the day, there is a value exchange, and that's how it gets quantified by SARS to determine, to say, look, as much as you didn't get cash, but there was an exchange, you got gifts, there is value towards those gifts. So in that particular way, then, I mean, you are generating income on a monthly basis. So that is that segment that each and every individual now, they need to be aware of, that if you're partnering with brands, you're getting paid either in cash or kind. Therefore, you're actually one of those that we can consider an influencer, or you're part of the gig economy.
That the cash part is self-explanatory. You get paid for what you work for, the content that you've created. But in kind, and this happens a lot to influencers, where they work with a brand and the brand will give them a phone or will give them flights for a particular trip, and they can shoot and talk about it. How would they then express this to SARS? Is a program in place where they would be able to express just how much they got through gifts and in kind, as you say?
So because of the fact that, I mean, you are carrying on this on a regular basis, so you have to treat yourself, of course. If you're not doing this under a business or your business that you've registered as an influencer, you're doing that as an individual. So therefore, automatically, you become sort of like what we call a sole proprietor. Therefore, that means on a monthly basis, you have to do your numbers. You have to sit down, do your Excel, say, how much did I generate this month? How much did I even spend to basically even produce the product that was expected of me? Therefore, in that particular way, we are able to either determine that, listen, you've made a profit or not. Because the value of you being flown, the value of you, or the value of that particular phone, let's say 20,000 rands. So SARS will say, what is the market value of that phone? So that's how you would declare what is the value that you would have generated. So therefore, on your income tax, you'll say the market value for that particular phone is 20,000 rands. Then that is an income that you've basically generated for that month. So you have to track that. You have to be disciplined. But what is important in South Africa, Mateo, is that the Income Tax Act is clear that we work on voluntary disclosure basis. So SARS does not automatically know how much an influencer has generated for that particular year up until the influencer declares. Therefore, SARS will start now to either verify that information or either audit that information. So that is very important. That I think people should not be worried that now all of a sudden SARS will know each and every person how much they're getting. The law is clear. It's based on voluntary disclosure purposes. Therefore, the citizens have to be proactive.
So, Luncedo, this would then be important for influencers to treat themselves like businesses, keep the receipts, keep the information that would show the value of things like phones, the value of things like tickets that they get from these companies, but also just be ethical enough to, voluntarily tell SARS what they have been getting up to during that year.
Absolutely, and that's where Mateo, the awareness and the education towards all taxpayers in South Africa, especially when it comes to their tax obligation, is very important. And therefore, again, also this not only sits with SARS only, but even private companies that are doing work with the influencers or the gig economy, especially some of the marketing agencies, have to play that role to say, how do we educate the people that we do business with so that they're not found to be on the wrong side of the law? Because some of these kids, of course, they are not tax experts. All they care about is their talent and them generating income for themselves. In terms of their obligations, therefore, all parties have to come in and play that role. And that's why I'm saying even marketing agencies have a very huge role here to play when it comes to tax education and tax awareness. But as well as the influencers themselves or the gig economy, they have to take it upon themselves to say, look, since now I'm being treated as a sole proprietor, or I have to declare my income on every 6 months, what is it expected of me? You're saying that you don't know. It doesn't work in the court of law.
And also the importance of getting a tax guy, getting an accountant. It's all part of being a small business. And that's what it's about. Influencers catching the eye of the South African Revenue Service. They're earning money, they're getting gifts and are getting paid in kind. SARS wants to know to make sure they pay their bit as well as business owners.
That's the sound of your business growing. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, turn your passion into profit with Capitec Business Banking. Save up to 50% on fees. Get fast credit approvals, personalized support, and Forex for your business. Open your business banking account on our app. Bank on better with Capitec, the business bank for everyone. Capitec is an authorized FSP 4669. T's and C's apply.
The Aubrey Masango Show on 702. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
Let's walk the talk.
More fascinating conversations after 8 here on 702 on the Aubrey Masango Show. He joins us now to tell us more what's on the menu.
Mateo, good evening to you. We start the show straight after 8 o'clock, or the news at 8 o'clock. Tsepo Matlu, psychologist and life coach and author, joins us to discuss the question, to what extent are you enabling those who hurt you continuously in your life? Yeah?
Like an enabler?
Yeah. To what extent do you participate in the continuous injury of your character and of your own mind?
Sure.
Very, very interesting question there by Tsepo Matlu. The second hour of the show, we look into the Madanga Commission and all of the explosive issues that are coming out of that. And Chad Thomas, crime expert at IRS Forensic Investigations, joins us to give us some analysis. And then in the third hour of the show, in our Gwantu feature, we talk about arranged marriages in Africa. How old are they? And how old is the concept of being married for love on the African continent? And then the fourth hour is an open line, and that's the show for tonight.
Always shaking tables. Always shaking tables. Aubrey Masango are joining you after the 8 o'clock news. I'm more interested around that Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. I missed out on most of the testimony today, so I'll be catching up that on the Aubrey Masango show. Time now is 7:30. Dominic Majola giving you your headlines.
Thanks, Mateo, and good evening. KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has exposed how alleged underworld boss Vusumuzi Kat Matlala was found with a cell phone in prison. Matlala was caught with the device during a raid at his Hosimampuru Correctional Facility cell more than 2 months ago. He was detained in April for the attempted murder of his ex-girlfriend and actress Tebogo Tobojane. Testifying before the Madlanga Commission today, Mkhwanazi alleges the phone was smuggled into the prison by correctional service officials.
The commissioner called me because after watching the address, he felt that he must send officials, the credible correctional service officials, to go and inspect this detained person, Kat Matlala, and to go and inspect his cell and search him. It is when they did that, on the direction of the Commissioner of Correctional Service, that they found the cell phone.
Mkhwanazi says the incident has sparked serious concerns about possible corruption within the Correctional Service Department.
So the commissioner then contacted me directly and he said he himself, as a senior officer within the criminal justice system, within law enforcement, he doesn't have much trust on what's happening now in this area. And he says, for sure, someone brought in this cell phone and facilitated for this cell phone to get to the suspect or the detained person inside.
The Police Taxi Violence Task Team has been roped in to assist with investigating the murder of Gauteng chairperson for the National Taxi Alliance. Thamsanqa Moyo was gunned down while driving along the Soweto highway. Police say the suspects, who were travelling in a minibus taxi and a Toyota Yaris, fled the scene after firing several shots at Moyo's car, killing him on the spot. Spokesperson Mavela Masondo says while preliminary investigations are underway, the Taxi Violence Task Team will lead the probe.
The motive for the killing cannot be confirmed at this stage, although we suspect that it is related to taxi violence, taking into account the victim is the chairperson of the taxi association.
Affected Mercedes-Benz drivers whose cars fall under the specified models that are being recalled by the National Consumer Commission are urged to contact their nearest dealership. In a statement released today, the Commission says the company has identified 2 faulty models, namely the 4 EQE 295 and the 98 GLC 254. The NCC says more than 100 vehicles are being recalled due to safety concerns. The Commission was highlighted the steering wheels of the affected vehicles do not meet the required specifications. NCC spokesperson Petun Daba.
According to Mercedes-Benz, the bolting of the steering coupling might not actually meet the specifications. And it basically means that the mechanical connection between the steering wheel and the steering rack might loosen over time. And of course, when that happens, it might actually lead to a loss of the vehicle's steerability.
A fine Friday in store for Gauteng tomorrow. Temperatures will drop to overnight lows of 5 and peak at 10 degrees, alternating heights of 28 and 29. Clear skies in Cape Town as well as tomorrow, along with moderate southeasterly winds at a low of 11 degrees and a high of 24 degrees. The top story in EW and the Sawa. KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has exposed how alleged underworld boss Vusumuzi Kat Matlala was found with a cell phone in prison.
It's spring, SA, and here at DecoFern, we say it's time to say yes. Say yes to new friends. Yes to new adventures. Will you marry me?
Yes!
And definitely say yes to a few new things.
Welcome to DecoFern.
Say yes to awesome savings at the DecoFern Furniture Spring Sale, with up to 35% off on outdoor furniture and much more. In-store now or at decofernsa.co.za.
You know those finfluencers, the kind of bros making bank in Bali, calling themselves Forex gurus, promising you can make money while you sleep if you just buy their course. But then you end up losing sleep, waking up for different market openings, checking charts, scanning the members-only group chat for signals, and you start wondering, why do they call it day trading when you're spending all night spending your money to make money, only to realize that they make their money selling courses on how to make money. Oh. When you can't trust overnight wins, trust 30 years of market-beating returns.
Coronation. Trust is earned. Coronation is an authorized FSP.
Spring into gardening at Chamberlain from 4 August to 12 October. Best Buy ceiling trays at R29.90 and Cultura compost at R24.90. Available at any of our 9 branches throughout Gauteng. Expert advice and friendly service guaranteed. You also stand a chance to win your share of R90,000 in gift vouchers every Saturday until 12th October. Chamberlain, famous for hardware and gardening since 1903.
The Money Show.
Investment School.
And we're talking about a very interesting topic tonight, the Rand Roulette. When is the right time to take your money offshore? A lot of conversations like this happened over dinner tables or over the braai or at work, where people are telling you, I'm moving my money offshore. I'm not too comfortable with this volatile rand. We'll be talking about that tonight with Gary Boyson, director at Rand Swiss. He joins us here in studio. Patrick Matidi joining us on Zoom, head of equities at Aluwani Capital. It's very attractive, that notion that you can move your money, possibly grow it offshore. But is it as easy as it sounds?
Well, these days, it is actually pretty easy to move funds offshore. So, of course, you have to obey the rules. So you've got up to your 1 million rand single discretionary allowance, and you can, of course, apply for the authorized international transfer, which is the AIT PIN, and that'll give you another 10 million. And that is a lot easier than has been in many years. So, we do these kinds of clearances for clients all the time. You need to prove the source of funds. You need to obviously have the documentation in place, or you need to declare 3 years assets and liabilities. But I think SARS reserves around 21 days to get that clearance sorted out, and we've seen them go through in probably 4 or 5 days at the moment. So definitely from an administration point of view, it's actually become quite easy to get them approved. And then it's just a matter of having an international account that can receive the funds, and it's about, I suppose, picking your time on when you want to pull the trigger on the currency and executing. So we do the whole process kind of end to end. So I find it very easy. I think from a client's point of view, maybe if you don't know how to set up an offshore account, or maybe if you're not sure whether you should be doing this through a bank or a currency, what they call a treasury outsourcing client, so a TOC, then it can maybe be a little bit tricky. But really the process is actually pretty simple.
What kind of client should be looking at this option? Because I'm thinking about the deep pockets that you might likely have to move your money offshore. But what kind of client asks you or requests this type of investing?
I don't think it's not really a matter of the value. And there's many services that can do very small amounts and still build an offshore portfolio for you and correctly
so you don't have to be
it.
well into the millions.
No, not at all. No. Like I said, it's actually much easier if you're under $1 million, because then you can use the single discretionary allowance. So it's really, like I said, I think the type of person that should be looking at this is, you should look at it in the context of your overall investment strategy and your overall portfolio. So I think it's always difficult to say when should you do it and who should do it, but really, if you have 100% of your money domestically and you work domestically and you're in South Africa, your house is in South Africa, everything to do with your wealth is in South Africa, for me then it makes sense to take a portion of your capital and move it offshore, because you can diversify. There's just investment options that just aren't available in the local market. You can access things like Tesla and exciting stocks. I think Intel is up. Intel, I think, is up 30% today. So you've got a much wider universe. But at the same time, if you live in South Africa, you are just incredibly pessimistic and you've moved 98% of your money offshore and you have no emergency funds in South Africa, you should probably start thinking about building up a reserve in South Africa as well, because it's something that you are going to adopt, that currency volatility. If the currency blows out, or like we have now with the South African Reserve Bank suddenly deciding that we're not getting an interest rate cut, and you see the currency strengthening, and suddenly you have an immediate call on your money. You need to buy a house, or you need to you've got an emergency medical, but suddenly all of your assets are international. That's also not smart. Then I would say you probably need to be moving money back. So it really comes down to the client. I think all clients should have some element diversified, but there's no golden number on saying you should have 50-50 or that. It really comes down to the client situation.
Patrick, I'm quite the patriot when it comes to the South African Rand. I'm always rooting for it, even though it doesn't always turn out too good. But for somebody who's looking to move the Rand elsewhere in the world, what are those key markets where it's more successful to move our currency, giving its volatility and sometimes weakness against more stronger currencies?
Yeah, good evening, Mateo. Thanks for having me. I think it comes down to, the end objective. So what are you trying to achieve? And therefore, with that objective in mind, it kind of then leads you, to the best place where you feel that objective can be met, from an investment point of view, as a start. But I think also, to your earlier question around the purposes and the type of clients, I think the other element that one should consider is, especially if one is a traveler, if you're lucky enough to be, traveling frequently offshore, whether for leisure or for business, it may be an idea to have, some foreign currency put aside, to try and smooth out the volatility. But to come back to your question, and I think it really comes down to what are you trying to achieve? And therefore, with that in mind, what's the best destination to kind of achieve that goal? And then the destination will then point to the currency. So, for example, if you're trying to invest and diversify, and then maybe you are not finding great opportunities, let's say out of the US market, because that is expensive, Nvidia, Tesla, whatever PEs there may be, but you're finding better opportunities, let's say in Asia, right? Then to access the Asian market, you may need to then convert your rand to yen. Given again, where you are finding those opportunities and how you can best access them. But ultimately, as I keep saying, where you want to be invested will dictate the currency in terms of how to be invested.
When we decide then as investors to move some of our currency elsewhere in the world, what kind of research are we doing before we even pull the trigger of moving the money and getting the forms ready? But what kind of research are we doing to make sure we also safeguard ourselves? I'm sure you can tell I'm quite conservative with moving money. Patrick?
Oh, sorry. So I think, again, the research that you need to do is, if you're diversifying purely for diversification purposes and away from, let's say, the local currency, the processes that was highlighted earlier, I think that is key in terms of the admin, just making sure that you've got the right setup and you are on good terms with the regulation. And then obviously on the other end, you need to make sure that you're investing in markets that are highly regulated, and therefore, and again, the propensity to lose your money, to scams and all that kind of stuff, gets eliminated. And then you need to look at the investable universe. So what are you trying to achieve? What opportunities you're looking for that are not already available in South Africa? So, for example, if you're looking at investing in equities, but you do not want, commodities, you want, let's say, I don't know, some thematic, type of products that is not readily available in SA, then you need to understand that, understand it properly, make sure that, you know what the drivers are, the return expectations, in local currency. And you need to have some sense of, over that investment horizon, what do you think the rand will do? Because a big chunk of your expected return profile, being a rand investor, is both the currency movement and the underlying investment in terms of, if you invested in yen, for example, what are the yen returns and what is that likely to do in rand terms, once you consolidate and bring in the currency into the equation. So all of that still points to understanding what you're investing in, what are the key drivers, what is the purpose of your investment? Is it to diversify? Is it to grow capital? Are you trying to shy away from inflation? Or is it purely a currency play? Where again, you don't have to then go and buy equities or bonds, but you can actually sit, in cash. You can buy Swiss francs, for example, and just sit in that cash, and then that exchange rate against the rand, if you feel that the rand will weaken, can be the main source of your returns going forward.
Then, Gary, let's get into what's allowed and what's not allowed when you're moving your money. A single discretionary allowance. foreign investment allowance. What are the differences there?
Yeah, so the single discretionary allowance, that runs on the calendar year. So that's 1st of January to the 31st of December, and you can take out, essentially 1 million, and you can do it in tranches. And to your earlier question about how do you time this, how do you make the experience a little bit safer, you can, it's cumulative over the years. So following like almost a rand cost averaging strategy, if you're nervous that I'm going to buy this at the worst period and I'm going to lose money, you can do it in tranches. You can do 250, 250, 250, 100, 100, 100, whatever you want. But that allowance essentially runs for the calendar year, and then it'll reset again. So you have 1 million rand every calendar year to take out. With the AIT PIN, so that's your 10 million rand allowance, that is from the date of approval. So if you do obviously your application through SARS, and you get approved, let's say 18th of September, you will have until the 18th of September 2026 to move out your 10 million. And it can also be done in parts. It's really not an issue. Now, if you want to go above the 10 million, you can do special reserve bank approval. There are other mechanisms to transfer money out as well. So for example, now what we're seeing is there's also trust-to-trust distribution. So if you have a South African company that's held by a South African trust, for example, that trust can actually nominate an international trust as a beneficiary, and you'll be able to make a distribution internationally without limits. So there's lots of nuances to this as well. Another thing that I suppose listeners might not be aware of, that there's also a funds in, funds out rule. So if you have got an investment overseas, let's say you've taken 1 million rand out or 2 million rand out, and this year you have a call, you need to use the money in South Africa, and you bring 2 million rand back in. That actually that tops up your allowance. So now you actually can take 3 million out for this calendar year because you've brought money in. You can first kind of get that money out again, and then you can use your allowance. So it is, I think, more flexible than people maybe imagine. We kind of think of South African exchange controls and think, oh, it's impossible to invest offshore. I might as well just go with a feeder fund locally. But there are real benefits to having that diversification. But again, it comes down to you as a person as well. It comes down to what you're trying to achieve with it. But yeah, I mean, it does get very nuanced. So exchange control is a very complex field. So everything from, where's the residency? Where did the funds come from? I mean, we've had people that have immigrated in like the 1980s that are now trying to repatriate money, but they didn't immigrate properly. So it can be quite complex. But nothing that, I mean, again, a quick consultation, kind of explaining the rules. I mean, I can't explain them all on radio, but yeah, I think those are the basics. And I think the message that listeners should take, that it is actually quite flexible, despite exchange controls being in place.
When you watch movies, you see the villain want like 10 million rand to be wired to them immediately. Is it that quick? Can it happen overnight, or are you going through a few forms before that money?
No, if everything's set up correctly, it's surprisingly quick. So typically when you're trading, say if we were to say, let's buy 500,000 rands worth of US dollars today, typically you trade for what's called spot. So that'll be a 2-day settlement period. So we would trade, and 2 days later, I mean, then we do the balance of payment forms, you do all the kind of paperwork around it, and 2 days later, it should settle at the receiving bank. You can trade shorter than that. You can trade for Tom, which is tomorrow, or you can trade for same day as well. So as long as it's before 12 o'clock. So I mean, in emergency situations, we've literally done trades for clients at 11 o'clock. They've had the money in their offshore account, it just means that we've got to do the paperwork really quickly. Yeah. So it's it can be done literally in a matter of hours. I know also on repatriating funds back to South Africa, depending on the banking institution that you're using overseas, it literally can be a matter of hitting the send button, and we'll wait for it on our side, and we'll see the ping come through probably 30 minutes later. So it can be really quick. If you are in that villain situation where you need to wire some money, you can sit there holding the gun on them, waiting for it to come through.
That was Gary Boyson writing a script for us about the Rand Roulette. We're talking in our investment school about moving your money offshore. Patrick Matidi, Head of Equities at Aluwani Capital Partners, joining us on Zoom. Gary Boyson here in studio. He's, of course, the Director of Rand Swiss. More information after this.
Feeling some lag in Sector 3?
Copy. Optimizing working capital. Ready. You're approaching a tight corner. Cash flow pressure ahead.
Low on liquidity. Supply pressure is building. Set.
Deploying cash injection in 3, 2, 1. flow.
Nice move. Better supply chain control.
Lab time advantage. Faster cash cycles, leaner inventory, and optimized working capital.
Ready, set, cash flow. Corporate banking from RMB. RMB, a division of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized FSP and credit provider.
Every wall tells a story. Now yours can be told with elegance, resilience, and colors designed to last. A creation rooted in heritage, perfected for today. The wait is over. The finest has arrived. Discover the finest, only at Chamberlain. Chamberlain, famous for hardware since 1903.
One festival, endless flavor, and 2 unforgettable days of timeless music. The DSTV Delicious International Food and Music Festival, powered by Lotto Star, returns on 20 and 21 September at Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit. On Saturday, the stage erupts with Don Tolliver, Questa, and Nkabi Zezwe. Then on Sunday, experience the legendary Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, Lyra, and more. The DSTV Delicious Festival, powered by Lotto Star. Tickets at Ticketmaster.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
The Money Show.
Investment School.
And we're learning about moving money offshore. Rand can be quite volatile. Maybe you decide, I'd like to diversify to another market. How does that happen? We're talking to Patrick Matidi, Head of Equities at Aliwani Capital Partners, and Gary Boyson, Director at Rand Swiss. I think let's pick it up with you then, Patrick. The strategy here is far more important, right, than not so much the timing. So what kind of strategies can people use when they're moving their money offshore?
Yeah, so I think when we speak of strategy, again, I mean, it comes back to what are you trying to achieve, right? And given what you're trying to achieve, how do you best navigate, and invest accordingly so that, in the fullness of time, you can look back and say, actually, my strategy worked, and therefore reap the benefits of that. So typically, I think as Gary mentioned earlier, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, just from an investment, principle point of view, irrespective of what currency you are invested in and how that is behaving. So you do want to have a little bit of your investment pot, spread across the different investment strategies, such that if one works, as the market goes through and cycles, if one doesn't work, hopefully 2 or 3 other strategies within the pot actually come through, and therefore you keep moving forward and growing your investments and accordingly. And then for us South Africans, we have for the longest of time, sort of being in this closed economy, that yes, it's sort of open from a currency flow point of view. But if you look at the GDP, we're pretty much a mining, sort of a village, which has we produce stuff from the ground and then ship it offshore, and therefore the currency becomes very important, not only for those who want to invest offshore, but also in terms of what's happening locally from a growth point of view, right? So our growth prospects, are linked pretty much with what happens with the currency, just given the openness of the economy. So you therefore want to have a little bit of diversification, not only from an investment destination point of view, but also from an underlying currency point of view, where you don't want, all your eggs to be exposed to one currency, such that, if the rand, let's say, depreciate quite substantially, which it has a tendency of doing every now and then, you find your investments, lacking in diversification and therefore behaving similarly and then suffering, that depreciation in the currency. So with that in mind, in the need for diversification, the strategy then becomes, how much to put offshore versus in SA, right? So how much to have in other currencies versus your home currency. And then typically, if you look at a typical pension fund, which is where we play, the regulation is very clear as to how much you can take offshore. But for an individual, it depends on your circumstances, the other assets that you may have, where you are in your growth, from a revenue earning point of view. And so you kind of need to also to bear that in mind and not just ship everything offshore, right? Because then, diversifying, you're actually exposing yourself to the currency the other way. So once you have that in mind, in terms of how much then to take offshore, then you need to go a step further and say, okay, where am I finding the best opportunities, for my rents, when I land offshore, right? So again, in the past, the US has been the most favored destination, largely because it has outperformed, other markets, for the longest of time. But of late, it has kind of been wobbling with other, jurisdictions actually coming through. So you need to then diversify and say, well, I can't just be investing in the US just because it's done well previously, but I need to have a little bit elsewhere. Let's say Asia or China, for example, at some point was very popular, and so it goes. So then again, it's sort of the same principle of making sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
You continue to diversify, and then you hopefully, as I said, if one investment doesn't work out, hopefully the others can still carry you through, and then come back and meet your objectives in terms of your strategy.
I'll ask this question to the both of you, Patrick and Gary. When moving money around, what type of documents are we talking about here? Of course, your ID, whatever, but you moving millions in some cases. So what is needed from you from a regulatory point of view?
I suppose from our point of view, I suppose it has become more stringent in South Africa since the grey listing. So you do need, each FSP that's moving money, or each bank, they have their own what's called RMCP, so their risk management compliance program, and they spec out what documents they require to onboard you as a client, and the typical documents, as you say, probably almost certainly an ID, proof of bank account. Proof of residence. Usually, some people also require proof of a tax number as well, and they have to prove that they can know their clients. So that's the typical documents that you require to open any account, and from there it's really the internal mechanics of the platform that you're using. So you can move money with a phone call once that's been cleared.
Once that's done.
Once you've been essentially featured and your KYC is.
So you can't anonymously move the money.
Those days are gone. And if you are using layered structures and that, these days we have to get to what's called the UBO, which is the ultimate beneficial owner. We need to understand what entity is controlling the funds. So the old days of numbered accounts and trusts with no beneficiaries listed and just money flowing from one place to the other, that has become a lot more stringent, and there are very, very strict rules and very strict penalties in place. So you can expect some level of KYC due diligence. But from there, once the accounts are open, then it becomes, as I said, fairly simple.
It's all good and well moving the money offshore. Would you like to add on to that, Patrick?
Yeah, if I may quickly, I think the one key element which is part of the anti-money laundering regulation, your proof of funds or your source of income is quite key. So you can't show up in my office with a bag full of cash and say, okay, please, let's take this offshore. So you have to show that money was acquired through legitimate sources, and there's no subversion of any regulation. And once you've passed all the hurdles, as Gary mentioned, there's a requirement for ongoing screening. Right, so for you need to every now and then provide more documentation in terms of where you live, your source of income, and just to make sure that what you said initially is still relevant going forward.
You're spoiling a lot of movie scripts for me, but it's fine. Let's talk then about the taxation around this. Anything that is definitely certain, death and taxes. Moving this money around, of course, then there are some duties.
Well, yeah, the taxation, again, it's complex because it depends on how you're investing and which type of tax you're talking about. So if you're talking about an immigration where essentially you're going to be leaving the country permanently and you're trying to move assets, your local self will sell all your assets to your international self. So you'll have a capital gains tax event on any assets that you have. In terms of if you as Patrick was saying, if you can prove the source of funds and everything is legit, you've opened an account, you just want to move it, there's no tax on buying dollars or short of, I suppose, VAT. But that doesn't create a tax event in the client's name. But I think it is important to understand the tax implications of having an offshore portfolio as well. So probably the one that gets talked about the most is the CITES taxes. So specifically, if you're investing directly in the US or directly in the UK, there are essentially death taxes in the US, kind of where that starts to become observed is at $60,000 invested overseas. And above that, as a direct investment grows, it's actually a tiered scale all the way up to $1 million. And at $1 million, you could potentially pay a 40% estate duty. Now, in South Africa, our estate duty is at 20%, up to 30 million, and from 30 million onwards is at 25%. So the challenge is that if you don't structure it correctly, you might end up having to pay the IRS a whole whack of cash. And there's all sorts of products that can do this. So the guys look at the offshore endowments, offshore sinking funds that essentially swap your tax position with an insurer. And in that world, the insurer is essentially paying the tax, and you can avoid the CITES issues. But it also, as Patrick has kind of mentioned, it depends on the territory that you're investing in as well. So if you are looking at Europe, for example, you're not facing the same risk.
But it's possible to be taxed in both jurisdictions.
And then you've got to look at the DTA, so the double taxation agreement. So the tax does become a little bit more complex. But just one other point I'll make as well. If you are investing and you are expecting a weaker currency, there is an advantage to a direct investment over a purely local feeder fund direct investment, in that you won't be taxed on the depreciation of the currency against the principal of the investment. And what that means is that it can be slightly more tax efficient to take a direct investment over a local investment in a weakening rand environment. In a strengthening rand environment, works the other way around.
Inverse.
So if you're a patriot and you then maybe it would be better to go through a feeder fund.
That was our investment school. Unfortunately, running out of time. Very, very interesting conversation there. When is the right time to move your money offshore? Patrick Matidi, Head of Equities at Aluwani Capital Partners. Gary Boyson, Director at Rand Swiss. They are head teachers today on Investment School.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
This is EWN.
Good evening, I'm Dominic Machola. Political parties have questioned the value of the almost 100 G20 meetings held so far this year under South Africa's presidency, with the EFF saying it appears merely to be a tick box exercise. While the EFF has bemoaned the choice of service providers and the apparent lack of benefits to black-owned businesses and disadvantaged groups, the MK party has demanded